What if the next major political breakup wasn't overseas but right here at home? What if parts of the United States simply decided they'd had enough and turned north? This isn't just internet chatter anymore. A Newsweek poll in 2025 found that 1 in 5 Americans would support their state seceding if it meant joining Canada. That's 66 million people questioning their American identity and considering a new flag, the maple leaf. Trade wars, cultural rifts, economic turmoil, they're all adding fuel to the fire. These aren't conspiracy theories. They're political strategies gaining traction by the day. So let's count them down. These are 10 U.S. states that could be the first to cut ties with Washington and join Canada instead. Number 10. California. California, the Golden State, often feels like a country within a country. With the world's fifth largest economy, boasting a GDP exceeding $4 trillion in 2025, it has both the financial power and the political clout to stand alone. Supporters of the Calexit movement argue that California's progressive policies often clash with federal stances, particularly on issues like immigration and climate change. In recent years, public support for independence has fluctuated but remains surprisingly high. A 2024 poll by the Public Policy Institute of California revealed that 32% of respondents favored secession, up from 25% a decade earlier. Advocates believe that California's technological dominance and agricultural strength could sustain an independent republic. However, critics point to California's vulnerabilities. The state relies heavily on water imports, faces an ongoing housing crisis, and grapples with wildfires and other climate-related challenges. Economists argue that breaking away could disrupt trade relationships and federal funding for essential services. The cultural divide between California and more conservative states continues to grow. Whether the state ever acts on its secessionist impulses remains uncertain, but the conversation is far from over. Furthermore, California's complex relationship with federal agencies could complicate any secession effort. For now, California remains firmly in the Union, but the possibility of a breakaway is more than just a passing fantasy. Number 9. Texas. Texas, the Lone Star State, has never completely shed its independent spirit. After all, it was its own republic from 1836 to 1845 before joining the Union. The idea of Texas has gained traction in recent years, with some state legislators even proposing referendums to let voters decide. The state's economic prowess adds weight to the argument. With a GDP of $2.5 trillion in 2025, Texas boasts a robust energy sector, leading the nation in oil and natural gas production. Proponents argue that this energy wealth could provide a strong foundation for independence. Political motivations also play a role. Many Texans feel disconnected from federal policies regarding gun rights, immigration, and federal land management. A University of Texas poll in early 2025 found that 35% of residents supported the idea of independence. Yet, there are significant obstacles. Texas receives billions annually in federal aid, particularly for disaster relief and healthcare. Additionally, disentangling from the U.S. military infrastructure would present massive logistical and security challenges. Beyond economics, cultural factors fuel the Texas discussion. Still, with slogans like "Don't mess with Texas" turning into calls for Texas first, the prospect of a Texit remains a subject of heated debate. Number 8. Hawaii. Hawaii, the island paradise in the Pacific, has long harbored an undercurrent of independence sentiment. The Hawaiian sovereignty movement has been advocating for a return to native governance since the island's controversial annexation in 1898. In recent years, this push has gained traction among younger generations. Hawaii's geographic isolation makes the idea more plausible. Situated over 2,000 miles from the mainland, the state already feels distinct from the continental U.S. Additionally, its economy, supported by tourism, agriculture, and military contracts, generates substantial revenue. Legal battles over land rights and historical grievances continue to fuel the movement. A 2025 survey by the University of Hawaii found that 28% of residents supported some form of self-governance, whether through independence or increased autonomy. Challenges abound, however. The state heavily depends on imported goods, including fuel and food, which would complicate any bid for self-sufficiency. Additionally, losing Hawaii would significantly impact U.S. military strategy in the Pacific. The cultural resurgence of native Hawaiian traditions adds a social dimension to the movement. As cultural pride strengthens, the call for Hawaiian independence will likely grow louder, though the road to sovereignty remains steep. Number 7. Alaska. Alaska, known as the last frontier, has always stood apart geographically, culturally, and economically. The Alaska Independence Party (APE), founded in 1984, has consistently advocated for a referendum on secession. While often dismissed as fringe, the movement has seen renewed interest recently. Alaska's abundant natural resources make it a compelling candidate for independence. With vast oil reserves, fisheries, and untapped mineral wealth, the state theoretically could sustain itself. In 2025, Alaska's GDP topped $80 billion, largely driven by resource extraction. The geographical factor also contributes to secessionist sentiment. Anchorage sits closer to Tokyo than to Washington, D.C., reinforcing the state's sense of isolation. Many residents feel disconnected from federal decision-making, especially regarding environmental regulations affecting resource industries. However, critics argue that Alaska's small population and harsh climate make self-sufficiency a challenge. Moreover, federal funds support critical infrastructure like the Alaska Permanent Fund and defense installations. Military considerations also weigh heavily on this discussion, given Alaska's strategic importance. Despite the obstacles, the spirit of independence remains deeply ingrained in Alaska's identity, and the idea of an Alaskan republic refuses to die. Number 6. Vermont. Vermont, a small but politically distinct state, has also flirted with the idea of breaking away. The Vermont Republic movement, inspired by the state's brief stint as an independent republic from 1777 to 1791, argues that the U.S. federal government has grown too large and unresponsive. Economically, Vermont's reliance on small-scale agriculture and tourism presents both strengths and weaknesses. In 2025, the state's GDP reached $37 billion, with its craft beer industry and organic farming sector drawing attention nationwide. Proponents believe that Vermont's community-oriented culture could support an independent state. The state's progressive politics further fuel the movement. Vermont often finds itself at odds with federal stances on healthcare, environmental policy, and military spending. A Castleton University poll in 2024 revealed that 21% of Vermonters supported secession. Logistically, however, independence would be complicated. Vermont receives significant federal support for healthcare and infrastructure, and its geographic location amid other U.S. states complicates trade and security considerations. Historically, Vermont's fierce independence mindset has kept this conversation alive. For now, Vermont remains a quirky but committed part of the Union, though the independence conversation lingers in coffee shops and town halls. Number 5. Florida. Florida, the Sunshine State, might seem like an odd candidate for secession, but its demographic and economic growth have prompted speculation. With a GDP exceeding $1.6 trillion in 2025 and a booming tourism sector, some argue Florida has the resources to go it alone. The state's diverse population brings mixed opinions on the issue. While many long-term residents express dissatisfaction with federal policies on taxation and immigration, newer arrivals from northern states tend to favor unity. A 2025 survey from Florida Atlantic University showed 26% of respondents supported independence. Geographically, Florida's strategic location offers advantages. Its extensive coastline and major ports make it a potential trade powerhouse in the Caribbean and Latin America. Additionally, the state has strong state-level governance and infrastructure. Yet, the potential downsides are significant. Florida is highly susceptible to hurricanes and relies heavily on federal disaster relief funds. Furthermore, its large retiree population depends on Social Security and Medicare. As state leaders weigh these challenges, discussions about independence become more nuanced. Despite the challenges, Florida's independence debate continues to surface during election cycles, often as a reflection of broader national divides. Number 4. Oregon. Known for its lush forests, progressive values, and quirky charm, has occasionally flirted with the idea of independence or at least greater autonomy. With a population of 4,233,358 as of 2023, Oregon ranks among the more liberal states in the U.S., often finding itself at odds with federal policies. 5. Economically, Oregon punches above its weight, boasting a GDP of approximately $261 billion in 2023, driven largely by sectors like real estate, manufacturing, and healthcare. 4. However, despite this economic strength, income inequality remains an issue. In 2024, reports showed that 30% of households in cities like Portland were housing cost burdened, spending over 30% of their income on rent or mortgage payments too. Politically, Oregon operates under a Democratic trifecta, controlling the governorship, Secretary of State, and Attorney General offices, a reflection of its left-leaning electorate 9. Yet, rural areas in eastern Oregon often clash with urban centers over issues ranging from environmental regulations to gun rights. Crime rates also pose challenges for Oregon, particularly in certain urban areas. According to recent data, Portland faces significant public safety concerns, with residents experiencing higher than average rates of property crime. 7. Number 3. New Hampshire. New Hampshire, home of the Live Free or Die motto, has long championed small government and individual liberties. The New Hampshire Liberty Alliance and similar groups have proposed various secession measures over the years, citing federal overreach as a primary concern. Economically, the state is relatively self-sufficient. Its GDP, which reached $96 billion in 2025, benefits from a strong manufacturing sector and a low unemployment rate. Advocates argue that New Hampshire could manage independently, especially with its border proximity to Canada. Cultural attitudes reinforce the sentiment. Many residents pride themselves on self-reliance and view Washington, D.C. as disconnected from their values. In 2024, a University of New Hampshire poll found that 29% of respondents favored exploring independence. Logistical hurdles persist. However, New Hampshire depends on federal funding for healthcare and education, and its population size raises concerns about long-term viability. With a proud libertarian streak, this debate will likely persist. Still, the state's commitment to liberty ensures that the secessionist conversation endures. Number 2. Colorado. Colorado has emerged as a surprise addition to this list due to its rapidly evolving political and economic landscape. Known for its outdoor recreation industry and booming tech sector, the state surpassed a GDP of $460 billion in 2025. Secessionist sentiment here stems from rural areas that feel overshadowed by urban centers like Denver and Boulder. In 2024, several northern counties attempted to organize a statehood for North Colorado movement, arguing that state and federal policies failed to represent their interests. Economic considerations bolster the argument. Colorado's legal cannabis industry and thriving tourism sector generate billions annually, making self-sufficiency plausible. Additionally, the state enjoys significant renewable energy production. The challenges, however, mirror those of other states. Federal support for infrastructure, national parks, and military installations would be lost in a breakaway scenario. Public opinion remains divided, with only 24% of Coloradans supporting independence, according to a 2025 poll. Number 1. New York. New York, the Empire State, might seem like an unlikely candidate for secession, but the idea has gained traction recently. Advocates often point to the state's economic power, with a GDP of $2.1 trillion in 2025, and its global influence through Wall Street. The movement primarily focuses on splitting New York City from upstate regions. Supporters claim the city dominates state politics and resources, leaving rural areas underrepresented. A 2025 Siena College poll showed that 30% of upstate residents favored exploring the split. Economically, an independent New York City could potentially thrive. It remains a global financial hub and a magnet for international tourism. Conversely, upstate regions argue that separation would give them more control over tax revenues and policies. The hurdles remain substantial. Complex legal, financial, and logistical questions loom large, especially concerning federal aid and trade agreements. The cultural and economic dichotomy between the city and upstate fuels the debate further. Yet, as political polarization intensifies, the idea of an independent New York continues to surface in policy debates. The United States has long prided itself on unity, but growing political, economic, and cultural divisions raise questions about the future. Do you think any of these states could seriously break away? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more captivating stories from Globe Discoveries.